The Flip Wilson Show paved the way for sketch and variety television as we know it today. Before The Richard Pryor Show, before Chappelle's Show, it was Flip Wilson that had America rushing to their TV sets during prime time. Celebrities like Bill Cosby, Richard Pryor, James Brown, Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, and Aretha Franklin would all stop by. The Flip Wilson Show was the place for black artists to go well before the Arsenio Hall Show. Now, the highs of the Flip Wilson Show lasted just 2 years before the ratings would decline and lead to a cancellation. His comedy was known for transcending race, and the show held that same standard. Some blacks took issue with Flip's desire to avoid touchy subjects and not divide his audiences by focusing on race. This would provide trouble for Wilson throughout his career and could have been a factor in deciding to leave show business in the 80s. That, along with his divorce, family issues, and drug habit that would lead to his arrest in 1981. Hi, I'm Jay Will, and this is a story you should know. Flip Wilson was born Cleroy Wilson Jr. According to the New York Times, he was one of 18 children. Now, at the age of 7, Wilson's mother abandoned his family. Unable to care for all of his children alone, Wilson's father placed him in foster care. After running away from home numerous amounts of times, Wilson was sent to reform school. Wilson's poor and messy childhood eventually gave way to a career in the Air Force. When a recruiter asked him his age, the then 16-year-old Flip lied and said he was 17. Once in the Air Force, Cleroy got his nickname Flip Wilson for being what his fellow servicemen described as flipped out. He would use his natural charm and charisma to make the entire barracks laugh. One of his commanding officers convinced him to take typing courses where he began to write some comedy material. Wilson was eventually discharged in 1954 and had decided to become a comedian. After his service in the Air Force, Flip found his way to civilian life as a bellhop at a San Francisco hotel. At the hotel's nightclub, Wilson became known for playing a drunk character in between the scheduled acts. The character was popular enough for Wilson to begin performing his routines all throughout California. Now, at first, the act consisted of mostly ad-libbing, but eventually Wilson got to the point of performing written material after working hard to develop the character. While on his travels, Flip met folks that seemed to predetermine his success. Somewhere along the road, Flip committed himself to a 15-year plan to be a famous comic. A timeline that kept his mind on his goals when he saw colleagues like Bill Cosby and Redd Foxx pass him by and get TV spot after TV spot while Flip was still doing the Chitlin circuit. In Flip's commitment to this 15-year plan, he began to become scientific about his comedy. He was influenced by Mac Eastman's book, Enjoyment of Laughter, to find out the mechanics behind comedy. Grinding night after night made Flip anxious, tired, and at this point in his career, a bit of a drug addict, smoking marijuana heavily and snorting coke almost as often. Wilson's big break came when Redd Foxx appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Carson asked Foxx who was the funniest comic around now. Foxx would go on to answer, Flip Wilson. From then on, Flip was booked and busy. All it took was a cosign from another famous comic. He became a regular on The Tonight Show and The Ed Sullivan Show. Flip used this rocket fuel to build a career with signature bits like his telling of the story of Christopher Columbus from the point of view of a black man. Everyone loved Flip Wilson. Richard Pryor even told him, "You're the only performer that I've ever seen who goes on the stage and the audience hopes you like them." Critics commended Wilson for his humor that didn't rely on race. However, as much as Wilson was praised, he was criticized just as much. One of the main criticisms was that Wilson often diffused his blackness. In response to those who voiced their opinions, Wilson said, "Funny is not a color. Being black is only good from the time you get from the curtain to the microphone. My main point is to be funny. If I can clip a message in there, fine." Now, in 1970, Wilson's record, The Devil Made Me Buy This Dress, won the Grammy for Best Comedy Album, breaking Bill Cosby's streak of 16 straight wins in that same category. That same year, NBC would give Wilson his own self-titled variety show, where he became a household name and set the precedent for black stand-up comedians to host their own shows. The Flip Wilson Show is noted for being the first successful network variety series starring a black man. Before the show, the only other black hosts of variety shows were Nat King Cole and Sammy Davis Jr. Flip's show was the first one that stayed on the air for several years. Now, during the show's first 2 seasons, it was the second most watched show on television. Wilson won 2 Emmy Awards and a Golden Globe for his work on The Flip Wilson Show. Flip's most famous character was Geraldine Jones. Now, Geraldine was played by Wilson dressed in drag. Geraldine was portrayed as a sassy Southern woman who flirted with some of the show's guests, but was always committed to her boyfriend, Killer, who was always unseen. Jones was irrepressible, flamboyant, and confident. When asked to describe the character, Wilson said, "She may not project the image of a refined, sophisticated lady, but she's honest, she's frank, she's affectionate. Geraldine is liberated. That's where that's at." Geraldine Jones would go on to influence characters like Shanae Jenkins from Martin and Wanda from In Living Color. Also Big Mama's House and Medea as well. Geraldine spawned several catchphrases like, "The devil made me do it," and "What you see is what you get." Eventually, the success of the show and the character Geraldine would begin to weigh heavily on Wilson. Fans would often ask Wilson to do an impression of the character when they saw him out in public. The success of the Flip Wilson Show began to weigh on its star. Much like the success of Chappelle's Show, where fans would constantly shout the show's catchphrases during Dave's stand-up performances. Kevin Cook, who wrote Flip, the inside story of TV's first black superstar, backed this information up. When fans asked Flip to do Geraldine for them, he shook his head. "Sorry, she's retired," he said. "Mr. Wilson's going the rest of the way alone." This didn't come without sacrifices, however. Wilson's approach to comedy definitely comforted white audiences by not being too overt, and his trademark character Geraldine was seen by black men in particular to be damaging to the black self-image. These gripes challenged Wilson but ultimately never made him adapt. The conflict even trickled into the making of the show when Richard Pryor believed Flip was too comfortable with what the white folks at NBC wanted him to do. The relationship between the two comics would continue to be strained for the rest of their lives. This would be due to Flip's respectability politics and assimilation tendencies of the 1950s and 60s, which was a direct conflict with Pryor's 1970s countercultural attitude. Pryor's point of view as a black man in America was informing what was to come later, the future, a future where a black comedian could make jokes and carry on without the regard for the feelings and tempers of a white audience. It was the second most watched show on television in its second season, but dropped to 12th in its third and 50th in its fourth season. After season 4, NBC canceled The Flip Wilson Show. After the show, Wilson appeared alongside Richard Pryor, Bill Cosby, Harry Belafonte, and Sidney Poitier in Uptown Saturday Night. The film is noted for bringing together so many notable black entertainment figures. Now, outside of show business, Wilson was married twice in his life. He married his first wife, Lavinia Patricia, in 1957. The two would go on a divorce in 1967. Wilson had 4 children with Blondell Pittman, but the two were never married. In 1979, he would go on to marry Cookie McKenzie and would go on to have one more child with her. That same year, he won custody of his children and quit show business to be with his family. In a 1979 interview from his Malibu home, Wilson said, "I accomplished what I set out to do. I wanted the whole cookie and I got it. Now I want to spend more time with my children, make sure they don't go through what I did." In 1981, Wilson would surprise many after he was arrested and charged with possession of cocaine and hashish oil. Wilson was 47 years old at the time when airport police found 2.5 grams of cocaine and several grams of hashish oil, along with some marijuana after he was coming back from a flight. According to reports, an anonymous caller told police Wilson was in possession. Wilson consented to a body search when police questioned him. Wilson was released on a $2,500 bail. Now in 1985, Wilson made his return to primetime TV with Charlie and Company. The series was looked at as CBS's version of The Cosby Show, which was a big hit for NBC and had premiered just a year earlier. The series also starred Gladys Knight as Wilson's on-screen wife and Jaleel White as one of their children. Della Reese would be added to the cast halfway through the first season. Unfortunately, Charlie and Company failed to gain the same traction as its counterpart on NBC and was canceled after just one season. Wilson would go on to spend the last decade of his life mostly out of the spotlight. He guest starred in sitcoms like 227, Living Single, and The Drew Carey Show. Wilson unfortunately would die in November of 1998 from liver cancer at just the age of 64. The criticisms that Flip Wilson received when producing his show is a problem that isn't exclusive to Wilson alone. This is what nearly every black stand-up comedian goes through. Is the art I'm creating damaging to the black self-image? The more successful the show got, the more Flip lost himself, as evident by fans' constant demands of performing characters when they saw Wilson out in public. Eventually, he decided to walk away from it altogether. This is what makes him a transitional figure in comedy, an unsung hero, apart from the rest of the comedic icons we have come to know and love like Redd Foxx and Richard Pryor. While Wilson broke barriers by making white and mainstream audiences comfortable with blackness on television screens, how important were those laughs?